If your mind has been restless lately, if you keep replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, fearing what may happen tomorrow, or carrying a quiet tension that never seems to leave your chest, then this message is for you, because Stoicism was built for exactly these moments. Nearly 2,000 years ago, Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome and one of the most powerful men alive, wrote private reflections to steady his own anxious mind. And what makes his words so powerful is that he was not writing from a peaceful retreat or a life free from problems. He was surrounded by war, betrayal, sickness, political pressure, uncertainty, and death. And yet, in the middle of all that chaos, he kept returning to a few timeless principles that helped him stay calm, clear, and strong. Today, we are going to explore 5 Stoic ways to stop worrying, inspired by Marcus Aurelius and the philosophy of Stoicism. And these are not vague ideas, meant to sound wise for a moment and then disappear. These are practical mental habits that can change the way you respond to stress, fear, uncertainty, and overthinking. So if you are tired of living in your head, tired of giving your peace away to things you cannot control, and ready to build a calmer, stronger mind, stay with me until the end, because each of these 5 ways builds on the last, and together they can completely change the way you carry your life. The first Stoic way to stop worrying is to separate what is in your control from what is not. This is one of the deepest foundations of Stoicism, and Marcus Aurelius returned to it again and again, because worry often begins the moment we try to control what was never ours to control in the first place. Think about how much of your anxiety comes from things outside your power. What other people think of you, whether someone will text back, whether your plans will succeed, whether the economy will change, whether the future will unfold the way you hope, whether people will misunderstand you, reject you, leave you, outgrow you, or fail you. The mind grabs these uncertainties and tries to solve them with worry, as if enough mental pressure can force reality to obey. But it never works. Worry creates the illusion of action while actually draining your ability to act well. Marcus Aurelius reminds himself that our mind can remain its own place, untouched, unless it chooses to be disturbed. That is the Stoic move, to stop confusing influence with ownership. You may influence outcomes, but you do not own them. You own your effort, your character, your choices, your interpretation, your discipline, your honesty, your response. You do not own the final result. And the moment you deeply accept that, something in you begins to loosen. Imagine an archer. The Stoics would say the archer's job is to train well, stand correctly, focus carefully, and release the arrow with skill. But once the arrow leaves the bow, wind, distance, weather, and chance take over. If the archer judges his piece based only on whether the arrow lands perfectly every time, he will live in misery. But if he judges himself by whether he prepared and acted well, then he can remain steady no matter what follows. That is how you must live. Do your part fully, then release the rest. Most people do the opposite. They neglect their effort and obsess over outcomes. They don't say what must be said, but they worry about being misunderstood. They don't prepare consistently, but they worry about failure. They postpone difficult decisions, then spend hours fearing consequences. Stoicism flips this pattern. It says, bring your energy back to the small circle, where your power actually lives. Ask yourself, what is mine right now? Is it my effort, my judgment, my attitude, my next step? Good. Then stay there. That is your territory. Everything outside it is noise. This does not mean you become passive. It means you become precise. You stop scattering your life into 1,000 imaginary futures and return to the only place where strength is possible, the present moment of choice. When you feel worry rising, pause and divide the situation into 2 parts. First, what is not under my control? Other people's opinions, timing, outcomes, delays, the past, luck, uncertainty. Second, what is under my control? The words I speak next, the way I prepare, the way I carry myself, the standards I keep, the courage I choose, the meaning I assign. Then place your attention only on the second list. That is not a trick. It is freedom. Worry grows where responsibility becomes confused. Peace returns when responsibility becomes clear. The second Stoic way to stop worrying is to stop calling every discomfort a disaster. Marcus Aurelius understood that much of human suffering does not come from events themselves, but from the dramatic story we attach to them. Something small happens, and the mind immediately declares an emergency. A delay becomes a sign your whole plan is collapsing. A rejection becomes proof that you are not enough. A mistake becomes evidence that your future is ruined. A bad day becomes a bad life. This is how worry gains power, through exaggeration. Stoicism trains you to remove the extra layer, not the event itself, but the fearful interpretation you pile on top of it. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to look at things plainly, to strip away the labels, the emotional theater, the exaggeration, and see reality as it is. This is harder than it sounds because the ego loves dramatization. The ego tells you that every inconvenience is personal, every obstacle is permanent, every uncertainty is dangerous, every discomfort must be solved immediately. But the Stoic mind asks a different question. What is actually happening? Not what am I telling myself is happening? That question alone can cut worry in half. Let's say someone seems distant with you. The worried mind says, they must be upset. I said something wrong. This relationship is changing. I'm losing them. But what is actually happening? A person is being quiet. That is all you know. Everything else is your imagination rushing ahead. Or maybe you made a mistake at work. The worried mind says, I'm going to be judged. I'm incompetent. I'll never recover from this. But what is actually happening? You made an error, and now there is a correction to make. Reality is often manageable. The story is what makes it unbearable. Stoicism teaches emotional sobriety. It says, don't intoxicate yourself with your own interpretation. See clearly. Speak accurately. Replace "this is terrible" with "this is difficult." Replace "everything is ruined" with "this is not what I wanted, but I can still respond well." Replace "I can't handle this" with "I do not like this, but I can bear it." That shift may sound small, but it changes your nervous system because your body listens to the language of your mind. If you keep telling yourself you are trapped, doomed, humiliated, broken, or helpless, your body will live in a constant state of threat. But if you train yourself to describe events with honesty rather than panic, you interrupt the spiral. Marcus Aurelius did this constantly. He reminded himself that pain is not unbearable unless we add the belief that it is unbearable. He reminded himself that the obstacle can become the path. He reminded himself that if something external is troubling you, the disturbance comes not from the thing itself but from your judgment of it, and that judgment can be revised. This is not denial. Stoicism never asks you to pretend pain is pleasant. It asks you to stop making it larger than it is. There is power in saying, yes, this hurts, yes, this is inconvenient, yes, this is uncertain, but no, I will not turn it into a catastrophe before it has earned that title. A disciplined mind does not minimize reality, but it does refuse to worship fear. So the next time your mind starts racing, try this Stoic exercise. Describe the event in one plain sentence, without prediction, without exaggeration, without emotional decoration, just the facts. Then ask, what is the next useful response? This trains you to stay with reality rather than drowning in interpretation. And when you do that often enough, worry begins to lose its favorite fuel. The third Stoic way to stop worrying is to train yourself to live in the present instead of mentally fleeing into the future. Marcus Aurelius knew that the human mind is rarely exhausted by the present moment itself. It is exhausted by the burden of everything it adds to the present moment. Right now, in this exact second, many of the things you fear are not actually happening. But your mind drags tomorrow into today, next month into this hour, and imaginary pain into a moment that may still be peaceful. You are not only carrying what is real, you are carrying what could happen, what might happen, what may never happen, and then wondering why your spirit feels so heavy. This is one of the greatest sources of worry, living too far ahead of your life. Stoicism brings you back. Marcus Aurelius continually reminded himself to confine himself to the present, to do what is in front of him, to meet this hour with justice, clarity, and self-command. Why? Because the present is where life actually occurs. The future is a concept. The present is the only place where virtue, action, and peace are possible. The worried mind says, but I need to think ahead. And yes, of course, there is a difference between planning and worrying. Planning is deliberate, limited, and useful. Worrying is repetitive, emotional, and circular. Planning says, Here is what I can do to prepare. Worry says, let me rehearse pain over and over again in case it arrives. Planning ends with action. Worry ends with exhaustion. Stoicism does not forbid preparation. It forbids self-torment disguised as preparation. Ask yourself honestly, am I solving something or am I feeding fear? The present moment has a way of humbling our anxieties. When you return to what is actually here, the world often becomes simpler. Right now, perhaps all you need to do is send the email, make the call, finish the task, take the walk, breathe through the discomfort, speak honestly, go to sleep, begin again. But worry resists simplicity because the ego would rather feel overwhelmed by 1,000 possibilities than grounded in one plain duty. Marcus Aurelius understood that peace comes from reducing your life to the task of the present moment, not your whole future, not your entire identity, not all your unresolved fears, just the next right thing. If you can learn this, your life becomes much lighter. Instead of asking, what if everything goes wrong? Ask, what is required of me today? Instead of asking, how will I handle all that may come? Ask, how can I handle this hour with dignity? Instead of demanding certainty from the future, give steadiness to the present. There is a hidden courage in that. It means you stop needing life to reveal the whole road before you take the next step. It means you trust that strength is built in increments. The present does not ask you to solve your whole existence. It asks you to be awake enough to meet what is in front of you. And there is another reason this matters. Worry often pretends to be wisdom, but much of the time it is simply resistance to reality. You do not want uncertainty, so you try to mentally outmaneuver it by living in the future. But uncertainty is part of being alive. Stoicism does not remove that truth. It teaches you to become larger than it. Marcus Aurelius lived with war, illness, political instability, and constant loss. He did not have guarantees. He had discipline. He had perspective. He had the practice of returning his mind to the now. You can do the same. When your thoughts run ahead, bring them back gently but firmly. Say to yourself, not yet. That is not happening now. Right now, I am here. Right now, I can choose my posture, my breath, my tone, my work, my response. That is enough. A calm life is not built by mastering all possible futures. It is built by mastering your presence in this one moment. The fourth Stoic way to stop worrying is to make peace with the fact that hardship is part of the human condition, not a sign that life is singling you out. One reason worry becomes so intense is because deep down, many people are shocked by difficulty. They treat struggle as evidence that something has gone terribly wrong. They think, why is this happening to me? Why is life so difficult? Why can't things just stay stable? Why do I always have to deal with problems? But Marcus Aurelius would say, this reaction comes from forgetting where you are. You are a human being in a changing world. Of course, there will be loss, delays, disappointments, misunderstandings, sickness, aging, uncertainty, effort, and pain. None of this is a glitch in the system. This is the system. Stoicism becomes powerful the moment you stop negotiating with reality and start training for it. Marcus Aurelius often prepared his mind in advance by remembering that he would meet difficult people, selfishness, ingratitude, confusion, and inconvenience. Not because he was pessimistic, but because he wanted to be realistic. He knew that when hardship surprises you, it shakes you more than it should, but when you expect that life will include challenge, you meet difficulty with more steadiness. The problem is not that life is hard. The problem is that many people secretly believe life should not be hard, and this belief makes every obstacle feel like an outrage. Stoicism removes that illusion. It says, you were born into a world of change. Do not ask for a life without friction. Ask for a mind that can turn friction into strength. Consider how much worry comes from resisting inevitable parts of life. You worry that people may disappoint you, but of course they will sometimes disappoint you. You worry that plans may fail, but of course some plans will fail. You worry that one day you may lose what you love, but of course everything borrowed by time will one day be returned. This sounds harsh until you realize it is also liberating. When you stop demanding permanence from a temporary world, you begin to appreciate what you have more deeply and fear its loss a little less. Marcus Aurelius practiced this perspective not to become cold, but to become sane. He knew that clinging creates panic, Acceptance creates resilience. When you accept that hardship belongs to the contract of being alive, you stop wasting energy on the question, why me, and start asking the only question that matters, how shall I meet this? That is the Stoic posture. Not self-pity, not denial, not bitterness, but readiness. You say, yes, this is difficult, but difficulty is not foreign to life. Yes, this hurts, but pain is not proof that I have been abandoned by existence. Yes, this is not what I wanted, but I still have the power to meet it with courage, patience, intelligence, and self-respect. There is a maturity in this that modern life often avoids. We are taught to chase comfort so aggressively that any discomfort feels intolerable. We are taught to expect convenience, quick relief, and emotional ease. So when reality arrives with its natural roughness, we panic. Stoicism retrains the soul. It says, do not build your peace on the fantasy of a painless life. Build it on your ability to endure and respond nobly. That kind of peace cannot be easily taken from you. It is forged, not granted. And once you understand this, worry starts to look different. It no longer feels like an emergency signal proving that something abnormal is happening. It becomes a reminder that you are being asked to practice your philosophy. You are being invited to become stronger, calmer, more disciplined, more truthful. Hardship is not always punishment. Sometimes it is training. Sometimes it reveals where you still depend on comfort to feel secure. Sometimes it shows you the gap between what you admire and how you actually live. Marcus Aurelius would not ask, how do I escape all problems? He would ask, how do I become the kind of person who can stand in the middle of problems without collapsing? That is the real goal. Not a life with no storms, but a mind that does not sink in every storm. The fifth Stoic way to stop worrying is to remember that your time is limited, and therefore your attention is too valuable to waste on needless fear. This may be the most powerful lesson of all, because Marcus Aurelius returned constantly to the reality of mortality. Not in a dark or hopeless way, but in a clarifying way. He reminded himself that life is short, that death is natural, that every person, every empire, every achievement, every insult, every praise, every fear will eventually pass. Why does this help with worry? Because worry often thrives on the illusion that every present concern is enormously important. But when viewed against the briefness of life, many of the things that consume us begin to shrink. The awkward conversation, the delayed reply, the imagined embarrassment, the need to impress, the fear of being judged, the obsession with having everything figured out. These things feel heavy largely because we forget how short and fragile this life really is. Marcus Aurelius used mortality as a lens to regain proportion. He would ask himself, is this worthy of the little time I have? Is this thought helping me live well, or is it stealing the day I have been given? This is not about becoming careless. It is about becoming intentional. When you remember that your life is finite, you become less willing to surrender it to mental noise. You become less interested in rehearsing disasters that may never come. You become less patient with resentment, pettiness, comparison, and imagined catastrophes. You begin to see that worry is not just uncomfortable, it is expensive. It costs you the irreplaceable currency of your existence. Every hour spent in unnecessary worry is an hour you do not get back. Marcus Aurelius knew this. That is why he urged himself to stop wandering, to stop living as if he had endless time, to stop betraying his own mind through distraction and fear. There is something deeply awakening about asking yourself, if I knew my time was limited, would I still be thinking about this in the same way? Often the answer is no. You would speak more honestly. You would love more directly. You would delay less. You would forgive more quickly. You would care less about trivial judgment. You would stop treating your life as a rehearsal. And that is exactly what Stoicism wants from you. Not anxiety about death, but seriousness about life. Mortality strips away nonsense. It reminds you that the point is not to control everything before you start living. The point is to live well now, while you can. Worry says, wait until you feel certain. Stoicism says, act well in uncertainty. Worry says, protect yourself from every possible pain. Stoicism says, become the kind of person who can face pain when it comes. Worry says, hold back until the future feels safe. Stoicism says, the future was never guaranteed, so live honorably today. Once you really accept that, your priorities begin to change. You stop asking how to avoid every uncomfortable feeling and start asking how to spend your remaining life in a way you can respect. You realize that calm is not found by eliminating uncertainty. It is found by refusing to waste your life arguing with uncertainty. So when worry enters, as it inevitably will, meet it with this question. If my time is limited, is this the best use of my mind right now? If the answer is no, return to what matters. Return to the work, the truth, the breath, the conversation, the discipline, the gratitude, the task, the walk, the prayer, the silence, the moment. That is where life is, and that is where freedom begins. So let's bring these 5 Stoic ways together. First, separate what is in your control from what is not, because peace begins when you stop trying to govern the uncontrollable. Second, stop calling every discomfort a disaster, because much of your suffering comes not from events, but from the fearful language wrapped around them. Third, return to the present moment, because the future is where worry multiplies, but the present is where strength lives. Fourth, accept hardship as part of life, because struggle is not a personal insult, but a universal condition, and resilience grows when reality is no longer treated as betrayal. Fifth, remember that your time is limited, because a short life is too precious to be consumed by unnecessary fear. If you practice these principles consistently, worry will not vanish forever, but it will lose its authority over you. And that is the true Stoic aim, not to become emotionless, not to become cold, not to pretend nothing matters, but to become inwardly stable, to feel fear without obeying it, to face uncertainty without collapsing into it, to live in such a way that your peace comes from character rather than circumstances. Marcus Aurelius did not control the chaos around him. He controlled the conversation within him. That is your work too. The world may remain unpredictable. People may remain difficult. Outcomes may remain uncertain. But your mind does not have to become a prisoner of those facts. You can train it. You can steady it. You can teach it to return again and again to what is true, what is useful, what is noble, and what is yours to do. So the next time worry visits you, do not immediately believe it. Pause, breathe, ask what is in your control. Strip the event down to its facts. Return to this moment. Remember that difficulty is natural. Remember that time is short. And then choose the next right thing. Not the perfect thing, not the guaranteed thing, not the fear-free thing, but the right thing. That is how Stoicism frees a person. Not all at once, but thought by thought, judgment by judgment, day by day. And if you do this long enough, you may discover something extraordinary. The peace you were searching for was never hidden in a perfectly controlled future. It was waiting in the disciplined mind you choose to build today.